September 2018. Mike Morford, Gray Hughes, and myself, John Lorden, decide we're going to do a deep dive podcast into the tragic deaths of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. We do pre-production work, tons of research, and start reaching out to numerous witnesses, family members, and law enforcement, even going as far as sending out good old-fashioned letters via snail mail. We continue to work for 5 months before hitting the record button on episode 1. Response was slow at first and then quickly swelled. Among all the tips, rumors, and online arguments, one thing was clear. This is a community that cares about JB and Tracie and making sure someone is held accountable for taking these young lives. We started this podcast wanting to see a cold case get solved, and thanks to the efforts of local law enforcement, Parabon Nanolabs, and a vocal community that never gave up, we have a very good chance to see that happen. We recorded several episodes before a significant development was announced on March 16th, 2019.
To the family, we thank y'all for your patience with law enforcement. We know it's been a tough road, it's been a long road, and we just really want to say thank you, and we hope you let others in your family know how much that's also meant to each and every member of law enforcement that worked on your case.
We've got a new piece that we know is part of the puzzle. That piece's name is Coley McCraney. But how do these pieces all fit together? Is he really the guy that everyone's been looking for almost 2 decades? Did our research or any tips that were sent in to us point us in his direction? What's the story of the entire investigation from start to finish? This isn't your local news station's 20-minute version of the story or even a 2-hour documentary. We're going to run all 10 episodes every other week, right up to a special live stream on July 31st, J.B. Beasley's birthday, and the anniversary of this senseless tragedy. Proceeds from the show were originally intended to go to DNA testing. Now that that isn't needed, those proceeds will be used to honor J.B. and Tracie's lives. Stick around to see how exactly we do that. We're also leaving the law enforcement contact information in these episodes because we believe there are more details out there that may help law enforcement and the prosecution find the truth of this case. And please keep in mind, Coley McCraney is innocent until proven guilty. You'll learn much more in an upcoming episode that charges being filed doesn't always mean a case is closed. This case started almost 20 years ago when a car was found on the side of a road. Are we now on the road to justice? It begins right now on 3 Men and a Mystery. Welcome to 3 Men and a Mystery. I'm one of your hosts, John Lorden.
And this is Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
And here we are, fellas, episode 1. For anyone out there that hasn't caught it, we did release what we call episode 0. It's basically a meet the hosts kind of segment, and it gives you a little bit of an introduction into the mystery that we're looking into, which is the murders of 2 young women in 1999, J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. Today's episode, we're going to go into the timeline. I'm kind of excited to dig into the details a bit. How about you guys?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a perplexing case, and there's a lot to go over. So I think the sooner we get into it, the better.
Yeah, we've got a lot of details to cover, so I think we just need to get started, and let's just jump in. Now, so everyone knows, I've been working with some information from web sleuths. I've been working with a lot of information from newspapers. I think I've reviewed probably no less than 100 different articles about this case at this point, and I've pulled together what I consider a timeline of some of the more important events. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be everything. We've got a lot of episodes coming up on future editions of 3 Men and a Mystery here, but I want to get kind of the basics laid out and kind of set up where some of these future episodes are going to go. So let's start with some information from the Birmingham News. This was published January 20th, 2000. According to an article from there, Ozark, Alabama is home to nearby Fort Rucker and boasts of its Consumer Digest ranking as one of the 25 best U.S. places to retire. It doesn't consider itself the kind of town where 2 teenage girls are abducted and murdered on the streets. However, that's exactly what happened in the early morning hours of August 1st, 1999. Tracie Hawlett was a majorette who wanted to be a doctor and a missionary. J.B. Beasley was an aspiring and talented dancer. Both were beauty contestant finalists. Both were 17 and about to start their senior year of high school. Now, something happened in the family. Morph, you want to tell us a little bit in particular about JB's situation?
So JB and her mother had gotten into some kind of altercation, and that left JB bruised. She was placed into foster care for approximately 9 months. And according to JB's mom, this is when some of JB's problems escalated.
Yeah, and I do think it's worth pointing out, we don't have a lot of detail about what this fight was at this point. We've been trying to reach out to people more closer to the case. We haven't had a lot of success with that yet. We're hoping as the episodes go on that might change. But it was described in the Anniston Star as a fight that left both mother and daughter bruised. And I don't know if they're talking about emotional or if they're literally talking about some type of physical altercation that happened. But because of that, JB wasn't living at home. She was basically placed in foster care with her dance instructor. So a little bit of a strange situation that's going on there. But on July 31st, 1999, that is actually J.B. Beasley's 17th birthday. And that is the night that her and Tracie decide to go out. So what happened on July 31st? 9 p.m. J.B. stops at the nursing home that Carol Roberts, who is Tracie's mom, is working at. She asks if Tracie can go to a party. After the party, J.B. was going to stay at Tracie's home so they could go to church together the next day. J.B. then drives to JCPenney, where Tracie is finishing her work shift. Around 9:20 p.m., Tracie gets done working at JCPenney in the Wiregrass Commons Mall in Dothan. She told coworkers she was tired and didn't really want to go out, but she still heads home to change. According to the Mobile Register, JB wasn't excited about going out either, but she wanted to make an appearance since the party was supposedly in her honor. And we've kind of heard conflicting reports about this. Some publications said that this was a field party. Some of the family has come out in more recent years saying, no, this was a birthday party specifically for JB. According to the information I'm seeing, it seems like it's kind of a little bit of both. And it does answer a little bit of a question where when you're looking at this case, you're wondering, why are these girls going out so late if they have an 11:30 curfew? I mean, they literally have a little over an hour of time for wherever they're going. But this kind of helps explain that. Apparently, this party was in JB's honor, and she just wanted to kind of make an appearance. So JB actually went to JCPenney, and then she follows Tracie back to Tracie's home, and that is information that came from a television news report in 2007. So around 10:05 p.m., JB and Tracie leave Dothan for this party. According to police records, at 10:30 p.m., the girls stop at a BP gas near routes 173 and 431 in Headland. They use a payphone there to call friends. Now, we're not really sure if that's to ask for directions. That's kind of what's assumed about this phone call, or potentially to tell these friends that they're not going to make it. There's just not a lot of detail about what this phone call is. Whoever was the recipient of that phone call, I haven't been able to find information publicly about who that person is or what this conversation was, but we're fairly certain because this is, according to the information we have, this is from a police sighting, that they were indeed at that BP gas. So 11:30 comes around and Tracie calls her mother from a different store. This is a Big Little convenience store that is in Ozark. The store has been closed for approximately 30 minutes. Carol Roberts, Tracie's mother, says that Tracie was laughing and seemed fine. Tracie tells her that they are lost in Ozark, but they'll be home in about an hour. She tells her mom she's at a convenience store that closed at 11, but they got directions from two women that were at the station. We know one of those women's name is Marilyn Merritt, and I believe the other woman is her daughter. And they have directions to get back to Highway 231. Carol Roberts, hearing that her daughter's on her way home, and exhausted from working, decides that she's going to go to sleep. August 1st, 1999, around 5 a.m., Carol wakes up and Tracie is still not home. Tracie's stepfather drives out to Ozark looking for car accidents along the way. The parents call local hospitals, but they can't locate the girls. Carol calls Dothan police around 8 a.m., and they also start looking for a possible car wreck. At the same time, in Ozark, around 8 a.m., the police department finds a 1994 Mazda 929, JB's car, on Herring Avenue, a dark, narrow street used as a shortcut through town, and less than a mile from the second payphone used by Tracie. Gray, do you want to give us a little explanation about this area? You're our maps guy. What do you notice about where this car was found?
Well, the vehicle is on a road called Herring Road, and it's very close to James Street, which is about, let's get a measurement there, about 53 yards from James Street. And if you go on to Herring Road, you can actually see a memorial that's there, and I believe it's still there today. It's if you go to Street View on Herring Road, you can see the memorial. Now, the car location is 0.73 miles on the road from Big Little Convenient Store. However, it's only about 0.43 miles as the crow flies, so there's really no really straight route directly to it. Now, around the vehicle, it doesn't seem like there's very many areas of, there's no lakes or swamps right near where the car was found. And that might become useful information later.
Yeah, the people that found the car, the police that found the car, noted that it was muddy, but there was no significant damage. I have heard some discrepancies in terms of how the car was parked or how it was facing. I've heard some people describe it as the car wasn't parked in line with the street, but I've also seen photos of the scene, and it looks to me like it's pretty much in line with the street. What is interesting is it's facing north on that road. So if it did come from Big Little, someone did a U-turn before they parked it, which doesn't really make sense. And as we go into the information, I think it's going to become more clear that this car was driven in a different direction. I don't think it came directly from the Big Little convenience store. So Marilyn Merritt, the woman that gave them direction, she stated that the car looked very clean when she had seen it, when she gave the girls the directions at 11:30. So something happens with that car where by the time police find it, it's muddy, though not terribly damaged. Police also noticed the car is nearly out of gas. And according to information that came from the family, JB had actually filled up the car the day before. So a lot of interesting questions about that. Why would the car be nearly out of gas? Why would they have not mentioned maybe to Marilyn that, hey, we need a gas station? You know, we're not even sure if we can make it home. I mean, based on the assessment from the police department, it seems like there was a good chance they couldn't have even made it the over 20 miles back to Dothan. On top of that, the investigation revealed that the car was spotted at that spot on Herring Avenue around 3 a.m.
So the car was seen at 3 a.m. Would that be enough time to use up the gas that seems to be missing from the vehicle?
It's a bit tough to know that because we don't know how much gas is left at this point. We don't really know a whole lot about JB's day leading up to this. You know, I did some calculations. We'll get into that a little bit more in next episode where we're diving into the details of the physical evidence. But it would be, if I remember right, to empty that gas tank would be about 8 hours of driving. And we know, at least from the events that we do have noted here, that we're talking about an hour of driving at most, maybe an hour and a half if we include the travel for, you know, JB meeting up with Tracie and going and asking her mom and all that stuff. So
do we know that they filled up they actually literally filled up the tank the day before?
It is described as a fill up. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So yeah, because it's a lot of driving. Now, you know, when I was a teenager and I first got my driver's license, did I just drive for the heck of it? Yeah, I would go out and just kind of, you know, drive. So, but 8 hours is a lot of time of driving. And could that have been spent all by JB by the time the car was found? There's a possibility of that, but once again, it's just strange because if the girls were worried about running out of gas, why weren't they talking to Marilyn about, hey, we need to find a gas station that's actually open this late? Because the big little convenience store was already closed. And we're not hearing about them being parked at the pumps at Big Little. There is another vehicle that's at the pumps, which we'll talk about as well. But so I'm really not sure. I don't feel like the girls felt like they were low on gas, which might lead us to the conclusion that whatever happened to them, whoever did whatever they did to them, drove their car a bit of a distance.
Is that gas station, does it allow self-service back then, or would you need to go inside to pay for the gas? I guess that's something we need to figure out, right? Yeah,
that is something we really need to look into more. You know, in the Web Sleuths thread where people are talking about that, there is a little bit of a debate of, you know, in 1999, you really couldn't just go to a gas station in the middle of the night and, you know, use a credit card or an ATM card. I don't remember that really being a problem back then, but for this particular area, I'm not certain. So definitely something we should dive into more as we go through all this.
I think now is a good time, too, to point out, as we mentioned some of these names, the witness Marilyn Merritt, we've reached out to some of these people to try and ask them to come on and clarify some of the things that have been reported. We did invite them. Marilyn Merritt, for example, the witness, was one that we invited, and she didn't respond to our invite. So I think that was important to mention here, that we wanted to have the actual people on to speak to what actually happened.
Yeah, and that invite is open, by the way. So if you are someone that's involved in this case in some way, if you're someone that we mentioned going through this and you feel like you have better information to give us, please, that's absolutely a huge part of the reason why we're doing all this. We want to have this conversation. We want to get it as right as we can, but we understand there's better information out there. We need your help to find that. Now, interestingly, in the Web Sleuths thread, someone actually says that Marilyn Merritt has passed away, and they included a link to an obituary. I went and read that obituary for myself. I don't think they have the right Marilyn Merritt, so I'm not positive that she has actually passed away. But so continuing on, August 1st, later in the morning, a sergeant with Ozark Police Department contacts Dothan PD and learns that Dothan PD is actually taking a missing persons report at that time from Tracie's parents. Dothan asks that Ozark keep an eye on the car while they send out an investigator. Once the investigator comes out, they decide they're going to tow the vehicle back to Dothan. And while they're waiting for the tow truck, the investigator finds the trunk release latch. So they don't have the keys for the vehicle, but the vehicle is unlocked. And that's part of this mystery as well. It seems like the driver's side window is down a little bit. JB's driver's license is on the dashboard. So a lot of strange elements that are going on. And when they release the trunk latch, they go back to the trunk, and that's where they find the two girls. That was around 2 p.m. on August 1st. Each girl had been shot in the head once. Chief Spivey noted that there was scratches and abrasions. He actually said on their arms, but a lot of later analysis specifically states that it was on Tracie. He believes that they were shot somewhere else, and then the car was driven and left at that location. Preliminary autopsy info says the time of death is likely between 12:30 and 2 a.m. However, Spivey would later state, much later in 2009, that the heat the next day made the time of death undeterminable. Toxicology shows that there are no drugs or alcohol in the girls. So a lot of strange elements that we've already got going on here, guys. You have any thoughts on this?
Well, you said that they were shot elsewhere, but we've heard that they were shot inside the trunk, but elsewhere, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. They do believe they were shot in the trunk. We do know that one shell casing is found on the leg of one of the girls, and that is being kind of debated as well. The more popular story is that the shell casing is on Tracie's leg, but there is a family member that has come out recently saying that's actually not true. The shell casing was on JB's leg. We do understand that Tracie was in the trunk first, according to what police say. So I assume that means that she was closer to the back of the trunk when she was found. And Tracie was shot in the temple JB was actually shot through the cheek.
And my take on how the police know that the shooting didn't occur there is possibly because if the shot passed through the trunk and into the ground, they would have been able to find the bullet fragment underneath the car where the exit hole in the trunk was. And I tend to believe they probably looked for it and didn't find it, which led them to think that this shooting occurred someplace else.
Definitely a possibility. Another possibility that's been talked about. There isn't an official explanation on this that I can find, but another possibility is that the pooling from the blood that basically leaked out of the trunk at some location blew with the wind as the car was driving. So when they looked at the bottom of the car, instead of seeing the blood dripping straight down, they saw that it had kind of splashed back up and towards the rear of the vehicle. But that's not exactly solid information that I can find on that. What is interesting here also is we have Spivey talking about this possibility that they couldn't really determine the time of death. But we do have that sighting that the car was probably seen at that location around 3 a.m. We know the girls were seen at 11:30, so I think we could firm it up to something happening within that 3.5 hour time frame.
And I think one other interesting thing to touch on is the driver's license being out, and that's been something that a lot of people have talked about as far as theories, which we'll get into later on, that could come back to be important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people wonder how someone would take control of the girls. I mean, if they're driving in a vehicle, they're heading home, how do you stop that vehicle? There has to be some means of getting them to stop. Some people theorize it could be someone that waved them down or flagged them down. Other people theorize that it could be someone acting as law enforcement. Some people even believe that it could potentially be law enforcement. So a lot of different aspects that we need to dive into more as we go through all this. August 4th, 1999 is the day of Tracie's funeral. A couple of other things happened that day. Governor Don Siegelman offers a $10,000 reward. The community would actually contribute to bring that up to initially $29,000, but later it would reach $45,000. And I don't know about you guys, but it always moves me when I see a community rally around a cause like this and really try to help. And having that kind of reward, I think, would be substantial and should help. But for some reason, it doesn't seem like it's either enough to get the person to talk or there's something else that's stopping them from talking. On top of that, at this time, August 4th, Spivey is quoted as saying a sexual assault is not suspected because the girls were fully clothed and their clothing didn't seem to be disturbed. The next day, it's reported that Mayor Bob Bunting states that the girls were submerged in water from the waist down before they died. Now, that information doesn't seem accurate. Later, Spivey would come out and say it wasn't from the waist down. They did note that the bottoms of their pants, basically from their shins down, were wet, and their shoes were also muddy, which is pretty interesting when you look at this area. There's a lot of parts on this that look pretty dry, but there's obviously some water sources. Gray, did you take a look at the map and try to find some water sources for us where they could have gotten some mud on them?
Yeah, I did. There's a few spots, but they're about a quarter mile south, maybe even a little more like a half mile. And there's a swampy area there. And there's ponds and little streams all over the place, but there really isn't anything right next to where the vehicle was. There's actually a baseball field to the right, 3 of them, just to the right of, or the east, I guess you would say, of the vehicle. And there's a wooded area, both on to the east and west of the vehicle. But you really can't see many creeks or ponds right in the immediate area.
Okay. I've also been bumping into some information about a police search that happened on a street called Depot Lane. And looking into that a little bit, there is actually a ice factory that is right there. So some people online are talking about the possibility that at least the ice factory was checked because it might have been known as a source for, possibly why they were wet. But unfortunately, It doesn't seem like anything really shook out of that part of the investigation. And there's this really strange thing that bothers me about this, where we know that they were at the Big Little at 11:30 and their car winds up less than half a mile directly away from it. But it feels like there was some travel that happened around this as well. And it's this weird thing. How does it boomerang back? Why do they wind up back so close to where they were last seen? There's something about that really nags me. I want to believe that they had traveled quite a distance and then whatever happened to them happened to them. But then why is the vehicle brought back so close to where they were last seen? It just, I don't know, keeps getting at me.
Yeah, that's something that's always been nagging at me as well. It's like, well, why would you? It makes me feel like the person maybe lives around in that area, and maybe that they saw them originally at the convenience store, right? But then somehow brought the car back. But that's sort of weird too. Why would you bring a car back to an area that you're from? So
that's a really strange thing here. It seems risky. Like, driving around in a car, you've got two bodies in the trunk. Why are you going to take that risk?
Yeah, exactly. It's just...
Morph, you got any thoughts on this?
That's one of the puzzling things about the whole case is the way that they were transported or moved around. It seems like they were executed. And if that's the case, why not execute them in the woods or in a creek or wherever and just drop them there and walk away? So it's hard to explain why they would be moving them around from location to location. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, it's almost like the person wanted them to be found because they were in Ozark. Maybe they saw that they were on a phone there and knew that they'd be tracked back to Ozark, and then just wanted to put the car back in the area and knowing that they'll be found. I mean, it's weird because they literally would have had to know that they were going to be found now and they're in the trunk. If you're going to execute somebody, you want to get away with it. Wouldn't you do it way out in the woods, just like Morph said, dispose of the bodies and then put the car miles and miles away, right? This is sort of like...
Unless where this occurred is too close to that person, if it's too close to where that person lives or where that person works or something that can trace back to that person, which is definitely a consideration here. It seems like there's one of two things. Either they're trying to get away from the scene where this actually happened and lead the investigation away from that, which certainly it seems to have worked, or they're trying to get back to some resource that they need in some way. Could it be that they left a vehicle at that spot? Apparently there is a hospital that's nearby, has a very large parking lot. Is there some other reason, someone they know that lives in that area, or are they familiar with that area because they work in that area? There's a lot of different. Do they know that road just as being a bit of a private road that doesn't see a whole lot of traffic at that time of night, and they thought it'd be a good place to just to hide them?
But you've got the car. It's actually, they drove it intentionally to that location. So the thing is, they could have driven the car anywhere. Why didn't they drive it, 50 miles in a different direction? But the thing is, they drove it there, and then they also put the girls in the trunk. So it's almost like they wanted them to be found, but they didn't want them near where they're from. But it's strange that why would you want them to be found? I mean, if you're really trying to execute, you just drive them out in the middle of the woods somewhere and then put the car somewhere else. That part is bothersome to me.
And that leads into the missing gas. If the person that did this is also driving that car all over, burning up gas, where are they going? Why are they driving it? It seems like more of a chance they're going to get caught or be discovered with this vehicle.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And not only that, but the risk. They're driving around with a vehicle that's almost run out of gas. What if they would have stopped somewhere else? I mean, we could have had this case solved with a little matter of luck, but unfortunately, that's not what happened here.
And also, I was just going to say, you mentioned the driver's license before on the dashboard. Well, it's weird that it's out there because if it had been, when you're driving around a car, that kind of stuff slides around, and I don't know if it would stay up on a dashboard either.
That was a big question on the Web Sleuth thread as well. I did run into a video, and I want to give a big thank you to Dime Detective for working so hard on the Web Sleuth thread. I ran into a video of a Mazda, the same year model, 929, and it was someone trying to sell it. So they literally went all through the car. And I got a good view of the dashboard. The dashboard does have a very round component to it where it's closer to the driver. But beyond that, it kind of flattens up to where it meets the windshield. So it depends. If the driver's license was actually on the round portion, there's no way it would have stayed there. We would have to assume that if that's where the investigators found it, that the driver's license was likely placed there after this vehicle was taken to Herring. However, if it's further up, closer to the actual windshield, that part levels out considerably, and I can see an item actually staying there through a drive. So,
But you bounce that off of the bullet shell that you mentioned earlier too, and that's weird. Then you'd have two items that potentially should have moved,
right,
but weren't. So
yeah. On August 6th, 1999, JB's family would have her memorial service. About a week later, Chief Spivey gets a call via Crime Stoppers that he says has taken this into a positive direction. We feel very good, very optimistic about the information. On the 13th of August, police begin to doubt that teens were at the rural party. It's interesting because if you read the articles kind of chronologically, you can see that everyone was initially assuming that the girls actually made it to the party and that this was all after the fact. But you finally get this information coming through where police are saying, you know what, we're not sure that the girls actually showed up at the party at all. Investigators couldn't find anyone at the party to actually acknowledge and say that they saw JB or Tracie there. On the 18th of August, Ozark police call FBI profilers for help. The behavioral science unit of the FBI sends a team to Ozark. There's not a lot of follow-up on that. I know they're working on a profile, a criminal profile, but I have not gotten any detail, at least up to this point, about what that profile is or what type of person they're looking for. On the 31st of August, police release a very poor quality image of a light-colored foreign-made truck. It's caught on surveillance camera near the gas pumps at the Big Little convenience store, but no purchase is being made at that time. Police state they want to interview the driver. On the 1st of September, 1999, they announce a big arrest. Johnny William Barentine has been arrested and charged with 2 counts of capital murder. The car was found in the immediate area of Barentine's house, Spivey says. Now, there's a lot that happens around this, but if you guys are listening to this podcast, you already have an idea. This case is still open. So we're going to dedicate at least one episode later on to this whole angle with Johnny William Barentine and all that information. So stay tuned for that.
He only lived a quarter mile, actually, from the Big Little convenience store. Very close.
Yeah. And, you know, in terms of once we get into the details, I think it's going to be really obvious to the audience why this arrest happened. But it is very suspicious. The guy is right there. And there's some things that he says about what happened that night. He tells the police a bunch of different stories. It's this whole other branch to this story. But unfortunately, it seems that he is not the person that is the murderer that we're looking for here. On February 15th in 2000, new investigators are assigned in hopes of making an arrest on this case. February 26th, 19-year-old Amanda Wellborn and 18-year-old Kelsey Bullock are found dead, shot in the head in Mississippi. Their bodies left at the side of a road. Connections between that crime and the crime of JB and Tracie's murder are investigated, and we'll get more into that in a later episode as well. March 1st, information comes out about a man in Mississippi that was in Ozark and left soon after the killings. He agrees to be brought back to Ozark for questioning. So as you guys can see, we've got multiple persons of interest once they kind of get over the hoop of this Johnny William Barentine part of the investigation, and things seem to move really consistently through the year 2000. In July of 2000, America's Most Wanted shows up. They send producers out to Ozark for possible coverage on the show. And on the 30th of July in the Montgomery Advisor, we're now getting close to the 1-year anniversary, Mayor Bob Bunting makes a comment saying, "We're no closer today than the day we found them, but I'm convinced we're going to find who did this horrible thing." And a lot of people made comments on the actual first anniversary. More if you want to tell us what you were able to find on that.
In the July 30th, 2000 edition of the Montgomery Advertiser newspaper, there was an entire article dedicated to the 1-year anniversary of the murders of Tracie and JB. And Ozark Police Chief at the time, Tony Spivey, lamented on the crime, saying, "It's on my mind in the middle of the night and when I wake up in the morning." And he commented about elections that were upcoming and whether or not elections would affect the investigation into the murders. And Spivey went on to say, "I learned a long time ago not to worry about politics. Whatever happens, happens. I know we are doing the very best to solve this case." The Ozark mayor at the time, Bob Bunning, also weighed in and commented as to him standing at the scene alongside of police and also seeing Tracie's and JB's bodies in the trunk of the Mazda. Mayor Bunning, who had spent time in combat in Vietnam, had this to say, quote, "I'll never forget that horrible night. I don't think I saw anything worse in combat. 2 pretty girls dead inside that trunk." And then local residents also weighed in. A man named Joe Adams said there was apprehension at first that a serial killer was in our midst. And since that time, we've experienced a lot of speculation and wild rumors, which pretty much sums up this case, I think, in general. Another man named Buddy Smith commented saying that he didn't think the girls knew the person who did the murders. He thought it was someone who saw an opportunity at or near the convenience store. And at the time, he voiced his concerns, or should I say, his confidence that the killer would be caught. Other people, a man named Jerry Crittenton, was an Ozark resident, and he said that it's been a real mystery that captivated people in that county, in that area. They all knew them to be good kids, and they were all hopeful that the killer would be caught. So the community themselves were concerned that a year had gone by and there was no arrest, and it was on their minds. And it wasn't just on the minds of residents, it was still on the minds of Tracie's mom, Carol Roberts. She told the paper that she sometimes slept on the living room sofa beside her 2 young sons, worried that the killer who took Tracie from them was still out there. And JB's mom, Cheryl Burgoon, was quoted as saying, "I don't know how to cope. I don't know how to move on." So a year later, after the murders, the families, the community, the investigators were all still shaken up and didn't know where to go from there.
Yeah, I've bumped into information about people that were in high school at that time or in school at that time saying, you know, their parents weren't letting them stay out anymore. Yeah, definitely has shaken up the community. And the fact that this has stayed unresolved for coming up on 20 years now, and people are still talking about this. It's still lighting up conversation threads all over the internet. People are still looking for justice in this. It's heartbreaking that there's still no resolution, but I'm hoping that that will change very, very soon.
Hey, John, do you know if America's Most Wanted actually did film the episode? Because it doesn't seem like I haven't seen it out there anywhere.
They did, and they actually, I found an article in the Montgomery Advertiser also for August 26, 2000, that actually stated that America's Most Wanted featured the case, and 26 tips came in as a result of that viewing. I've also seen information that in 2007, America's Most Wanted reran that case as well. There was another television appearance that happened January of 2001. It was announced that The Maury Show was going to feature Cheryl Burgoon, mother of JB, talking about the case. But unfortunately, after that airing, no tips are called in. We then have another interesting turn in May of 2002 when another car is found near where the girls were found. This car belongs to a woman named Melva Sue Johnston, who was found dead from blunt force trauma at a different location. Once again, we get a new person of interest here and possible parallels to the case. We'll talk more about that in a future episode. April of 2004, the News Courier reports that Chief Spivey attended a cold case conference. We feel like we've turned over every stone, but obviously we haven't because this case is still open. And then one of the more controversial things that has happened around this case, August of 2007, Court TV airs a show called Haunting Evidence, The Wiregrass Murders. And this show is essentially psychic detectives that are looking into this case. The word online is kind of all over the place when it comes to this show. I think we're going to maybe dedicate a whole episode to just talking about this show. There's several aspects of this show that are helpful because they have interviews with the family. The families were really engaged with this process. There is some good information that's presented, and then there's a lot of questionable information when it comes to some of the information that the psychics are relaying. So we'll get more into that. And that brings us to basically where we are now. Since then, flashes of this story come up on social media. Occasionally, you might have a little single podcast that comes up on this topic or a YouTube video. Apparently, there has been a documentary that's been produced. I don't know what's going on with it. I keep looking for some way to see it. I can't find it, so I don't know if they're struggling with finding distribution. But several months ago, Gray, Morph, and myself got together and we decided that we needed to move forward and instead of just talking about this case, try to do something and produce this podcast. And that's basically what brought us here. You guys have any other thoughts before we end today's episode?
I would tell everybody going forward to really sit down and pay attention to what we discuss, because there are so many moving parts and so many different pieces of this puzzle that we're going to try and reconstruct. And I think each episode will be able to clear up some stuff. But in certain instances, there's things that to this day we can't clear up. And hopefully somebody out there has some answers that they're willing to share with us, and they'll reach out to us and we can learn some more information.
Yeah, that's actually the key right there, is that we need people that are watching to share this information, far and wide. And then hopefully somebody that knows something will contact us and we can add that to the podcast, or maybe even send it forward to the police, because there needs to be resolution in this case.
That was really clear to me as I'm going through all the information on Web Sleuths. There's a lot of people interested in this case and they just don't know how to help. And that's why I wanted to really bring this to a longer form, this podcast format, give us a lot of time, give people a lot of time. Maybe some of you are sitting out there, you're not sure if this is the right time to speak up. Let me please try to engage that and say, yes, this is the time to do this. We're coming up on the 20th anniversary. The 20th anniversary is actually going to happen during the run of this podcast. My ideal situation here is you guys provide us with the information so we could put out the best version of the facts, the known facts, the events around this case, and that information might entice someone else to step up, possibly pick up the phone and reach out to law enforcement. It's our first priority with Three Men and a Mystery to help local law enforcement. We want to raise exposure. We want to jar memories. We want new tips coming in. If you happen to have some information about this case, you can leave that information at either daleso.com or by calling 334-774-2335. That's the Dale Sheriff's Office. Or you can call the Ozark Police Department at 334-774-2644. We're going to work really hard. We're going to keep presenting the best information that we can, but we absolutely need your feedback and your help to get all these details straight. If you have any corrections or new details for us, please email us at 3men@threemenandamystery.com. And that's the number 3 in both. Or you can reach out to us on Twitter at 3menandamystery, once again with the number 3. And you can also find us on Facebook. Morph, do you have the address?
So they can search for our page on Facebook, which is 3 Men and a Mystery True Crime Podcast. And from there, there's an option to send us a message. And if you want to share information that way with us, we'd be happy to take it and do what we can with it.
We're also looking to try something a little bit different with this podcast. We are going to be hosting some live streams over at Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube. So we hope that you'll join us there, become part of the conversation, help us move this case forward. Thank you so much for listening to episode 1 of 3 Men and a Mystery. We hope you'll be back for episode 2. We're going to dive into all of the physical evidence as hard as we can and see if we can figure out some more about this. Thank you so much. My name is John Lorden.
And I'm Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
And we'll see you next time.